தமிழர் தாயகத்தில் இடம்பெற்று வரும் தமிழின படுகொலைகளை தடுத்து நிறுத்துதல் மற்றும் தமிழ் மக்கள் மீதான மனித உரிமை மீறல்களை தடுத்து நிறுத்துதல் ஆகியவற்றை உள்ளடக்கி டொரண்டோவில் ஏப்ரல் 3 வெள்ளிக்கிழமை ஒருநாள் கருத்தரங்கு இடம்பெற்றது. கனடாவின் பிரதான அரசியல் கட்சிகளின் தலைவர்கள் மற்றும் அவர்களது பிரதிநிதிகள், நாடாளுமன்ற உறுப்பினர்கள், மனித உரிமை ஆர்வலர்கள் உள்ளிட்ட பலர் இதில் கலந்து கொண்டு தங்கள் கருத்துக்களை பரிமாறியிருந்தனர். கனேடிய பிரதான எதிர்க்கட்சியான லிபரல் கட்சியின் சர்வதேச கொள்கையாளர் பொப்ரே, அமெரிக்காவைச் சேர்ந்த மனிதாபிமான செயற்பாட்டாளரும் மருத்துவருமான அலெக்சாண்டர் அம்மையார் ஆகியோருடைய கருத்துக்கள் இங்கு முக்கியத்துவம் வாய்ந்தவையாக இருக்கின்றன. ஆய்வரங்கில் உரையாற்றிய பொப்ரே தமிழர் தாயக பிரச்சினை குறித்த தமது நிலைப்பாட்டினை தெரிவித்தார். ஸ்ரீலங்கா அரசாங்கத்தையும் தமிழீழ விடுதலை புலிகளையும் குற்றஞ்சாட்டும் வகையில் பொதுவான மேற்குலக அரசியல்வாதிகளின் கருத்து வெளிப்பாட்டை அவரிடமும் காண முடிந்தது. களமுனையின் யதார்த்தத்தையும் தமிழ் மக்கள் சந்தித்து வரும் மனித பேரவலத்திற்கு உடனடி தீர்வு குறித்தான கரிசனையுமின்றி மேம்போக்கான வகையில் அவருடைய கருத்துக்கள் அமைந்திருந்தன. இந்த கருத்துக்களுக்கூடாக கனடாவின் தற்போதைய ஆளுங்கட்சியான கன்சர்வேட்டிவ் கட்சியை சாடவும் அவர் தவறவில்லை. ஒட்டுமொத்தமாக ஈழத்தமிழ் மக்களின் பிரச்சினை குறித்த அக்கறையுள்ள ஒருவருடைய கருத்தாக அல்லாது ஒரு சராசரி அரசியல்வாதியின் நிலையில் பொப்ரேயின் கருத்துக்கள் அமைந்திருந்தன.
The first point that has to be said is that today, as we speak, in April of 2009, there is, without question, a major humanitarian crisis underway in the northeast of Sri Lanka. According to the best possible estimates, there have been at least 3,000 people killed in the last 2 months, the vast majority of whom are civilians. They're not guerrilla fighters, they're not members of any army, they're simply civilians caught in the crossfire. All any Canadian or anyone else has to do in order to understand better what's going on is to go on to a number of the websites of the International Crisis Group, of Amnesty International, of Human Rights Watch, and of the International Committee of the Red Cross, among other organizations that are trying to bear witness to the crisis that is in place. It is very clear that the government of Sri Lanka has, over the last several months and indeed the last couple of years, made a very clear decision that they are going to seek a decisive military victory over the Tamil Tiger organization, and that they are going to pursue that militarily based approach until it reaches what they would review as a definitive conclusion. It is also clear that tens of thousands of civilians are caught up in the middle of this military conflict as it reaches its final last phases. At one time, in fact, the first time that I visited Sri Lanka several years ago, the LTTE, under the terms of the ceasefire that were agreed to by both the LTTE and the government, and that was supervised by the monitors of the ceasefire, had control over about 15,000 square kilometers of territory. It's now clear that the area that is now controlled by the Tigers is only about 25 or 30 square kilometers. It's a very tiny area, and there are literally tens of thousands of civilians who are caught in the center of that conflict. We're here because there is a sense that this conflict is reaching its last terrible days, and it is causing an extraordinary loss of life and great hardship. Over the last several weeks and months, an increasing sense in the international community has been that we have to do everything we can to deal immediately with this humanitarian crisis, and that's why there has been a call for a very clear humanitarian ceasefire that will give an opportunity to civilians to get out of the area of conflict and give an opportunity for for political discussions to be held about how to deal with the nature of the conflict. There is very clear, if you look at the last statement that you saw on the wall, the statement from Amnesty International, there is irrefutable evidence of breaches of international humanitarian law and breaches of international obligations on the part of both the LTTE and the government of Sri Lanka. Is that every successful resolution of a conflict of where violence has been pursued and then where violence has not been pursued has been a clear commitment by both sides to lay down their arms and to find a political solution. And in particular, and I say this very directly to this audience, for the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam to recognize that the military struggle is over, and that there has to be a transition to a political approach. That political approach requires a shift. The shift took place in Northern Ireland when the IRA concluded that the military struggle was fruitless. In fact, was leading to violence, which was losing the support of the population, and which was not serving the people of Northern Ireland or the people of all of Ireland. There was a similar decision taken by the African National Congress when it concluded that a military solution was not going to work and that a political solution needed to be sought. And yes, it was a decision by the Palestinian Liberation Organization when, after a generation, a full generation of struggle and fighting and resistance, there was no way in which that approach was going to in fact produce any kind of positive result, and that the only way to reach a conclusion was to insist on the need for a political approach. We need to work harder as a country. Canada needs to work harder as a country to insist on an international role in helping to get to a political and humanitarian solution. We need to insist on stronger leadership from our own government in recognizing that the role of preventing conflict and the role of resolving conflict should be at the center of Canadian foreign policy. We need to reassert Canada's historic interest in finding the prevention and resolution of conflict as the heart of what we are trying to achieve. We have to ask ourselves the question, why is it that it's only after Japan and Norway and the United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called for a humanitarian ceasefire, why is it it's only after that happens that Canada finally says, okay, we agree too? Why is it that's always 2 or 3 days later that we find our government speaking out? Canada should be speaking out first. Canada should be leading the way. Canada should be engaging with Norway, with Japan, with the United States, with Britain, and with other countries in getting to where we know we need to get to as a world. This is a test for our conscience. This is a test for our political leadership. And this is a test not just for Canada, but for the whole world.